Welcome to the Human Meme Podcast. I'm David Bowles, and today, without our crackpot AI research team, I am delighted to share this new book I wrote with you now. The Wound Remains Faithful, a Human Meme Podcast. There is a particular cruelty in forgetting. We dress it up in softer language. We call it moving on, healing, closure. We treat forgetting as the natural conclusion to grief, as though memory were a wound that needs to close, rather than a responsibility that demands tending. But some wounds are not meant to close. Some wounds remain faithful precisely because closing them would constitute a second violence, an erasure layered upon the original harm. I have written a novel called The Wound Remains Faithful, a Tragedy of Nora. It took me more than 50 years to write it, though I did not know I was writing it for most of that time. The book concerns a 17-year-old girl named Nora who walks out her front door one August morning and never comes home. She writes poems in a notebook hidden under her mattress. She has never seen the ocean. She will never see it now. What follows in the novel is not an investigation in any conventional sense. There is no detective piecing together clues. There is no satisfying revelation in the final act. What follows instead is the aftermath, the weeks of silence, the months of waiting, the decades during which a family is destroyed by grief, while a community learns, slowly and deliberately, to forget. This is the pattern I want to examine with you today, not the specific tragedy of a fictional girl, but the larger question of what we owe to memory, and what it costs us when we refuse to pay that debt. When I was a boy growing up on the Great Plains, I learned early how communities respond to catastrophe. The lessons were never explicit. No one sat me down and explained the rules, but the rules were clear nonetheless. Silence was treated as virtue. Exposure was treated as sin. Surface mattered more than integrity. Calm waters were preferred to honest storms. If you blinked, if you simply refused to speak of something for long enough, then history never happened. The past became negotiable, subject to revision by collective agreement to look away. It took me years to understand that this kind of decency, this polished silence, often becomes its own form of complicity. The refusal to speak can be a violence. The insistence on moving on can be an abandonment of the dead. When a community forgets a murdered child, when the name fades from conversation until only the family remembers, something worse than the original crime has occurred. The child has been erased twice, first from life, then from memory. The novel I have written is fiction, but it emerges from this understanding. Every community has its Noras. There are children who vanished and were slowly forgotten, whose photographs yellowed in boxes, whose cases went cold, and then went silent. The institutions that were supposed to protect them transformed catastrophe into paperwork, and then transformed paperwork into archives, and then let the archives gather dust. The families were left alone with their grief, holding vigil while everyone else moved on. What does it mean to hold a wound open? It means refusing the comfort of closure. It means sitting with the discomfort of unresolved loss. It means insisting that some things cannot be metabolized, cannot be processed into acceptance, cannot be folded neatly into the story we tell ourselves about how life works. The Greeks understood this. Tragedy as a form does not exist to make us feel better. Sophocles did not write Oedipus Rex. so that audiences could leave the theater feeling resolved. He wrote it to force them to look at what they would rather not see, to hold the unbearable in view long enough that it might teach them something about fate and responsibility and the limits of human control. We live now in a culture saturated with true crime entertainment. Podcasts and documentaries and streaming series turn tragedy into content. They promise resolution. They promise that if we follow the investigation closely enough, if we consume enough episodes, we will arrive at an ending that makes sense. The killer will be caught. Justice will be served. The family will find peace. But this is a lie we tell ourselves because the alternative is too difficult to bear. Most cases are never solved. Most killers walk free. Most families never find peace. They simply learn to live with the absence of peace, which is a different thing entirely. The wound remains faithful, refuses the transaction that true crime entertainment offers. The novel does not solve anything. It does not heal anything. It holds the wound open because closing the wound would mean forgetting the person who suffered it. The title is not a metaphor. It is a statement of moral fact. The wound remains faithful to the victim even when everyone else has proven faithless through forgetting. I dedicated this book to the missing and murdered children whose names we will never know. That dedication is not rhetoric. It is the moral center of the entire project. We know the famous cases because they became famous because something about them caught the attention of media, because the families had resources or connections or simply luck. But for every famous case, there are hundreds that never made the news, thousands that were forgotten before they could be remembered. Children whose disappearances were noted in a police report and then filed away and never spoken of again. These are the children the novel mourns, not by naming them, because we cannot name them, but by refusing to pretend that their absence does not matter. I want to leave you with a question, and I want you to sit with it, rather than rushing to answer it. What do you remember that your community has agreed to forget? What silence have you participated in? What wound have you allowed to close because keeping it open was too uncomfortable, too inconvenient, too much of a disruption to the smooth surface of daily life? I am not asking you to feel guilty. Guilt is cheap and changes nothing. I am asking you to notice. I am asking you to pay attention to the forgetting that happens all around us, constantly, as a matter of cultural habit. Because once you notice it, you cannot unnotice it. And that noticing is the beginning of a different kind of faithfulness. The wound remains. Faithful, A Tragedy of Nora is available as a Kindle edition at Amazon and as an Amazon paperback and also as an audiobook. For those in need, we also offer a free PDF download at David Bowles Books. We only ask that if you can later afford to purchase the book in whatever media form suits you, that you do so to help support independent authors and small publishing houses. Thank you for listening. For the Human Meme Podcast, I'm David Bowles, wishing you a safe evening and a memorable tomorrow. Be a human meme.